Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Çağlar. I'm a lecturer in urban planning in the University of Manchester, and welcome to Advancing Data Science and AI seminar series. Very pleased to have Dr. Augusto dos Santos Pereira from Brazil joining us this afternoon. I believe it's 10 in the morning in Brazil. It's not too bad, isn't it, in terms of time zones? And his talk is titled Urban Regional Planning and Data-Intensive Technologies, Needs, Trends, and Challenges in Developing Country. And before I go into who is Augusto, I thought I might mention that we are recording this seminar to be shared in our YouTube links later. So if you don't want your camera to be seen, or I would suggest you to turn it off while the presentation is going on. And if you want to ask a question later, you can either unmute yourself and also turn your camera on to ask your question. I will be also monitoring the chat as well to collect the questions to ask Augusto later. Augusto is a geographer at the Brazilian Census Bureau. Among his latest projects, there can be found metropolitan integrated plans and studies of urban networks funded by the United Nations and by the Inter-American Development Bank. And he recently completed the Urban Studies Foundation International Fellowship at the LSE in London, working with Professor Michael Storper, and he was doing research on the conditions for the production of knowledge and innovation in Brazilian metropolitan areas under the current economic and technological paradigm. So I'm going to give the floor to Augusto, and I'm looking forward to the presentation, especially this fancy presentation slides you have on your video.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's the first time I'm meeting Professor. Am I saying it correctly? Kagler?
Chaglar, yes.
Chaglar. Okay. So thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor. Before anything, I like to say how I appreciate how I think Professor Matthew Harrison, who actually help us to organize this event. I'd like to thank Professor Nuno Pinto and Professor James Evans, and also now Professor Chaglar, because I started talking to Professor James Evans from the Department of Geography almost 7 months ago, because I was going to London and I wanted to reach out to the community in Manchester. But anyway, COVID got in the way. We all know that. So, but now we are here and we can talk, and it's an honor to me. Well, I prepared a presentation. It's called Urban Regional Planning in Data-Intensive Technologies, Needs, Trends, and Challenges in a Developing Country. Is everyone listening to me well? Am I being clear? Everything is functioning?
Yeah,
okay.
And I just spotlighted your videos, so people should see you in their main screen.
Okay, and now, am I appearing now?
No, everything's clear?
Okay, so that is nice. So, yeah, who I am, I've already been introduced. I'm Augusto Pereira. I have a PhD in geography, working in the verge between metropolitan analysis and economic analysis in geography. So I work with innovation. I work in the Brazilian Geographic Statistical Bureau, and it's the Brazilian Census Bureau, and I also been working with urban planning in Brazil. And I'm in this moment of transition towards academia, because I've been coming up with those solutions for urban areas, and I'm trying to systematize them and make them more something that can be used elsewhere with their due adaptation. So that's what I've been doing. And I'd like to extend a word of appreciation to the Urban Studies Foundation, because without them, this wouldn't be possible. So thank to the Urban Studies Foundation. And well, let's go now. What's my goal here? And well, we are in the seminar of advances in data science and AI, so I should be talking about advances in data science and AI. But I've been listening to previous talks, and usually they talk more about mathematics and the computer science. But I want to try to talk a little bit more about the domain expertise, this side of the data science. Usually we have, when we are talking about data science and data analysis and big data, usually we have these diagrams and we see that knowledge domain of a certain knowledge domain, it's usually important. And well, this is what I'm going to tackle today. Okay, so let's do this. Well, so I divided my talk in these three main points in terms of trends, challenges, and needs when we're talking about urban planning in a developing country. When in trends, I'll be a little bit more, we're going to do something like a funnel. We're going to like a inverse pyramid. So trends will be something more theoretical in the idea of why is that data intensive technologies are so important nowadays for city planning, and why there is so much pressure for adaptation of an application of data intensive technologies in the realm of, in everything, but also in the cities, and how we can manage this wave in our favor if we want to better plan our cities. Our challenges, but then I get more specific to Brazil, how we plan cities in regions in Brazil, and then some propositions, general propositions of how we could go about on proposing better solutions on the application of data-intensive technologies in urban planning, city management, and also regional management. Okay, so, well, let's talk about this idea of the trends. And here, again, a little bit more theoretical in the fields of geography, sociology, and economics, but always scratching the surface. I'd like to land the concept of techno-economic paradigms. Probably many of you know the term. If those who don't know it probably have this general idea coming from other places, but techno-economic paradigms will be what I will land here as a concept to try to understand what is happening, that data-intensive technologies, what are they, and why they are so important to urban planning now and to our life in general. Well, the general idea here is that capitalism, it evolves in waves of development and business cycles. It's an old idea, but it's being elaborated over decades, and I think it got to a point that, well, we need to revisit it and use it better. Mainly in geography, I think we have a serious opportunity to use this concept to grasp what is happening in terms of these waves of technologies in regards to how they reshape space in general and cities specifically. So we have this debate here that involves many thinkers and economists and geographers and philosophers and sociologists, but here we highlight four of them, and Marx and Smith, and anyway, but I'd like to call the attention to Joseph Schumpeter and his proposition on the waves of development in capitalism. So according to to Joseph Schumpeter, what happens is that capitalism, as Marx predicted, it comes to a point where it comes to a halt and starts a huge depression. And he agrees with Marx, but he corrects his idea, saying, yeah, it happens, but it happens a lot. It happens over time, according to what was proposed before by Kondratiev. But he adds something to Kondratiev's idea. He adds something saying that, well, what is the reason, what is the causation behind it is innovation. Because his idea of innovation, it's more what we consider now disruptive innovation. He's not as much talking laterally maybe, but it's not his main focus on incremental innovation. But what happens is he proposed that every 60 years, more or less, what happens is you have this impact of innovation you have these waves of economic development and a process of creative destruction. That's his idea. I'm sure everyone here has, even if it's not an economist or someone dealing with that, has even laterally heard something about this. Well, but in the last 40 years or so, new Schumpeterians developed on this idea, and they coined it the idea of techno-economic paradigms. So the techno-economic paradigm is based on families of technology and patterns of solutions. So what this means is that you don't have just a new technology, you have a new way of doing things. That's the pattern of solutions, is the go-to way to solve problems. And well, it becomes, it brings convergence of interests and strategies, and it helps to manage uncertainty. For instance, if you are an investor, how come can you invest on something that's so new that might take all your money, everything you got, because, well, it's so new, but it's risky. So when there comes a new pattern of technology and it proves to be, well, it's affordable, it's profitable, well, everyone, it's a crowd, there is a crowding in phenomena, movement, dynamic that helps shape the economic landscape in the form of cooperation. So those upstream, downstream, so investors and suppliers, everyone knows what this new technology is, and universities will start to bring the, new professionals with this new kind of knowledge and start producing knowledge, and everyone starts applying this. So the go-to pattern is, well, we come up with a new technology, and I'm talking to people from Manchester here. We come up with the new technology here, so we can apply steam engines to things, and then we start applying steam engines to everything that can. So we can improve it and have well, more productivity and so on and so forth. And then we start using internal combustion engines, and we start applying it to everything that we can apply it to. So then we have electricity, and everything that can be electrified is so. So that's the point. So we have patterns of solutions that helps us, guide us economically, and fostering cooperation. So and guiding learning, and having an effect on systems of expectations and incentives in a matter of Well, there is new incentives. Well, you can find money actually invested in the application of these new technologies. That's why this kind of wave brings about this convergence of interests and so much energy and focus somewhat different agents in the economic landscape. So, what is about the current business model? If we talked about the previous business models, well, we see that we have these technologies based on generalized and ultra-personal computing. Everything is a computer now, and you have drones, and you have 3D printers, and blockchains, and NFTs, or virtual reality, big data, IoT, and machine learning. Everything that we know so well, and because I've been reading papers from many professors of the community in Manchester, and well, I'm preaching to the priest here. But what happens is, if this is the current business model, it is based on somewhat on smart things. That's the pattern of solution. And we found a plethora of smart things: smart cars, smart watches, smart glasses, smart sneakers, and TVs, refrigerators, and thermostats, and even the house. The house should be a smart house now. In a special case of smartness, because it's the go-to example of what is a smart thing, that is the smartphone. In 2007, the primal example of what a smartphone should be is the iPhone, the launching of iPhone. So tech convergence, multi-purpose, responsive, interactive, online integrated, data intensive, and now paradigmatic in the sense of it is an example of how we should solve things. So that's my consideration in the trends of what are the technologies and the force behind it, and why they move forward, and why they come with with that strength in reshaping economic reality. But what about the city? What the city has to do with all that? Well, we can see the city from multiple angles: culturally, emotionally, from many angles, and we have research for all the kind of angles we can look at the city. But here I can look at the city as a piece of technology, and the biggest piece of technology ever produced. So my claim here is, a city is a technology of agglomeration of people, resource, and knowledge, which enhances opportunities of social cooperation, economic dynamics of scale and diversification, cultural enrichment, and political participation. So if it is a technological object, what is constituted of? Well, its constitution is an object of objects, like the smartphone, a lot of sensors and a screen and a body and everything together, and the motherboard and everything together creates a smartphone. Well, we have an object of objects, different objects, technological objects, in the buildings and the roads and the infrastructure and so many things. There are multi-purpose. And who is the inventor? Society, with its multiple agents, and it's also the user of this technology. So if it is a technology, it's subject to this transformations over time. Let's see what happens in New York and see that in just 13 years, from 1901 to 1913, we have this big transformation. Above, we have these carriages, all carriages pulled by horses, and just 13 years later, we have everything is now 40 and you have just one horse. And all the city with 100,000 horses and all the economics behind it, the employees and the knowledge of taking care of horses for the transportation now is changed so abruptly. So in these moments of change in technological perspective, the city is transformed in form, structure, content, function, and process. So maybe now we are talking about many ways and virtualization of the city. And Professor Nuno Pinto has a book in 2013 talking about that. And even more now we see that people are even buying real estate in the metaverse. So that's a hyper virtualization of our lives. So, but we gotta be careful. We have here two examples. This example here, I won't play the video, but this example here, I can share the video later to those interested, is a Bloomberg video in which they present Juicero. So the smartification of things, I won't use this word anymore, but this smart thing that is now applied to a juice maker, it got more than $100 million of investment, and it was smart. It would ask the store to deliver for you the juice, and there was these packages, and it would compress these packages, make the juice that was phenomenal. And well, Bloomberg people just got the package and squeezed it, and it was the same juice. And you would not need to pay $600 for this juice maker. So here I'm saying that the application of the current fad, in this case a fad, does not mean that you have a viable product and that is meaningful, that will solve anybody's life, or it may be a huge problem. And another presentation is more of a solution that is simple about urban design and use of bicycles and how you design the city and the presence of you name it, the presence of a well-designed city sometimes can be a good solution without that many application, that intense application of data-intensive technologies or IoTs or sensors or something like that. That's what big tech wants to do, and they play them. It's okay, they do them, but in urban planning, we gotta move this, try to engage in this trend in a way that we help guiding, orienting according to the interests of the general population and how they and the solutions they need. So here, let me just put here. Okay. So my claim here is data-intensive technologies constitute a central family of technologies in the current techno-economic paradigm. Smartization of things constitutes an important pattern of solutions based on the application of data-intensive technologies to different kinds of objects. The city, as a technological object, undergoes profound changes during the emergence of different economic cycles. The emergence of new solutions like autonomous cars cannot be complete without the adaptation of the city to them, an example of what happened in 1901 to 1913 in New York. So there is a reshape of the city to adapt to the car. The smartization of a city may be fruitful in tackling urban challenges, but this is not guaranteed. Urban planning, through participatory means, has an important role in understanding the necessities of those who live in the cities, in guiding the application of these technologies to them. So, this was heavier in terms of content and not, and well, let's go more towards Brazil and more practical things. In this regard, I just wanted to say what this has to do to Brazil. Well, if we work with waves, and waves, they have these components in time, well, usually we don't talk about this component in space. And usually it will behave like a drop effect in the water. So, well, what happens is it comes from a certain point and takes time to travel through space. So the solutions that started to happen in Japan, in Toyota, in the late 60s, they matured in the 1970s. They were published in early 80s. They started to be understood in early 90s. I'm talking about my city here in Curitiba. So courses that would say, well, we need something like what is happening in Toyota. And in mid-1990s, what happened was companies that could apply these knowledges arrived in our city, in Curitiba, Brazil, and then now we have a more mature process of lean production, and something that would resemble what was proposed in the 1970s in Japan. So it takes time for us it takes time as well in many places, but for us, for our cities, for our metropolitan areas, to adapt these new technologies, it takes time because it's not just applying them. You need to teach people how to understand it, how to create new things based on these new patterns of solutions. So that's something that we should consider. And this comes with the Brazilian challenges. So we have challenges as everyone else. So basic services, water, sanitation, mobility, traffic management, infrastructure, promotion of active modals, urban landscape and design, density management, control of use, and things related to environment, prevent natural hazards, and promotion of parks, taking care of expansion over natural areas. So urban life, in our case, the problems with violence are particularly important. And well, we gotta bring the feeling of belonging to the community, in the city, quality of public space. Anyway, economic development, social spatial conditions for us is particularly important in terms of spatial inequality, taking care of how to deal with slums and ghettos and gentrification, you name it. Many of these things are not specific to the condition of countries like Brazil, developing countries, but we have our specificity. Here, and there's a lot of study, especially in sociology and history, about the mixture of public and private interests. I do know, and I've seen this in Europe, and I've seen this, and you do know that when there is private pressure in terms of how we conduct public decisions and everything, it happens everywhere. But in Brazil, it's a case of study. The public and private interests are too mixed. It's really hard to bring an idea that is based on public interests and come up with solutions. It's a battle that is it's tiresome, but it's worth it's a battle worth dying for. And we have a different kind of scarcity of resources. For instance, we are producing a lot of knowledge here in people who are qualified to deal with data science and machine learning. You don't hire anyone. If you need to hire someone who is really qualified, it's hard because you're gonna pay salaries, wages found in London, New York, because they are here and working from home. The pandemic created this environment where people are working from home and created this opportunity for our tech intensive people to work from their homes for companies abroad. So they're earning more anyway. So it's really hard to hire now. And now scarcity also of resources in terms of the budgets of our town halls. They're really squeezed. So when they're hiring us to make urban planning, we gotta have a really small team, and the company has to have like dozens of projects at the same time, and it creates a constraint in how we conduct our business. So we have our own problems with environment conditions, because Brazil has a lot of areas which are biological hotspots, and we've got to be careful with that. And inequality has a huge toll on how we conduct urban planning here. Sometimes we propose, for instance, the installation of a new station, a new tube station in a neighborhood, a wealthy neighborhood, and what happens is people living there, they protest because they don't want their neighborhood to be accessible to poor people, even though poor people go every day there to work in their houses. It's just things that we go through here. Technological gaps. So this lagging modernization of our metropolitan areas, this time that takes from knowledge to comes from the urban centers from the north, so they can be applied here where locally there has been a demand. It takes time. Sometimes we don't know if we're doing that correctly or not, because these ideas were not produced here. And also we have our points of improvement recently. So we have a lot of data availability, sometimes even better than other places, even in countries, developed countries, sure, better than Germany, for instance. I've seen their websites and everything. It's really hard in certain places for it to get micro data. In Brazil, it's fairly easy to get micro data from the census or other kinds of surveys. We have been seeing a fairly bit of professionalization of public servants in the last 30 years. We have cases of success, and we've been structuring mechanisms for urban planning in the last 30 years. So how do we go about planning our regions and cities? Well, let's go. We have three main tools here, but let's talk about the master plan. I believe the master plan is a little bit different than what it is on the global north. I would call it more like I would call it more of a directives plan, because it has less of emphasis on design that sometimes I see in other places. But anyway, every municipality with more than 20,000 inhabitants has to do it. It has to be a horizon of 10 years, it's participatory, so you gotta promote meetings, public hearings, workshops, consultations, forums. It involves a multidisciplinary team, takes usually 1 year for medium-sized cities, and up to 2 years to our state capitals and bigger cities. It's based on these phases: mobilization and work plan, diagnostics. So in mobilization, we call the stakeholders and society in general and their representatives, and we devise a work plan. Then we have a phase of diagnostics. So it's thematically, we devise a lot of diagnostics. We devise scenarios, and we propose these directives, and we look for the agreements of the general population. So there is a phase of institutionalization and of propositions, and then we have a legislative process where sometimes they chop it off our propositions, and it's just a problem. And here, an example of participation, and we have these workshops and meetings and public hearings. So we try to foster participation. Brazil has cases of urban planning which are successful, like the city where I live. I am fortunate to work with the people who planned the city, and it has a functioning system of transportation which is highly integrated with zoning. So the more infrastructure and the more denser are in the denser areas, and so it's fairly economical, and the city is flooded with flooded. Well, in the city actually happens to have a lot of parks which actually prevented floods and are of interest of our leisure, and it's an international case in this regard. So what I mean is Brazil has its challenges, but we have processes of planning in which we need to engage the public so we can protect our decisions from spurious interventions. We need new ways to collect information because it takes too long to have our diagnostics, and we need automation of data analysis because so our workflow can guarantee better use of our scarce resources. So just to finish my presentation, what I would say is that in our diagnostics, we need fast quantitative diagnostics would lead us to more time for qualitative diagnostics and for better propositions. We need automatic mapping via machine learning and drones, integration of modeling strategies, not yet in use because of their costs. I believe the solutions in modeling, they're always there, but we don't have systems that can help us using them in urban planning. Maybe we can use VR with interviews and pooling. Maybe this can be adaptation of the propositions of Professor James Evans of walk interviews or something like that. We need better estimation of demographic, economic, and urban dynamics in the future, and versatility to change these as they change in the future. We need to enhance our participatory mechanism. Maybe the use of VR, for instance, can help, and the propositions need to be indicator-based, and we need to use benchmarks. Sometimes we have consultants, and usually I'm the one revising, and the consultant gives us goal, like 1,000 of something in 10 years, and I say, why not 2,000? Why not 500? Why not 5,000? Where did you come up with this? And we don't have systems for benchmarking in terms of the cities, city management, and monitoring with PI, machine learning drones would be something interesting. And I have an example of water consumption system that was created by our federal agency, Federal Water Agency. I worked in this project in 2009, and they have this huge system. So if you think of a consistent mechanisms, consistent method or model for prediction of water consumption, it might be for crops, for cattle, by crops, by cattle, by industries, 4 types of industries for different sectors, or households in urban or rural areas, whatever it is, they combined it together in a system. And well, whenever these agents needs to evaluate water permits, it has a consideration about how this basin was in the past, how it is now, the projections for the future, and then it can give an informed, somewhat informed decision. So why did I have, what did I come with this message? Is because, well, the papers are there. We have the solutions. We have the mechanisms. What we didn't have, what we don't have, is actually systems that combine them and bring the solutions. And in this case, here is my proposition to the community in the Manchester University to be attentive with this kind of need on developing countries. In this regard, please consider myself and Urbitech, where the company I consult to, as liaisons in Brazil. If you need a problem to investigate, Brazil is filled with problems, and can help you get the data and get the information and know the stakeholders and help you to develop your research in Brazil. Well, this is it.
Thank you, Augusto. It was brilliant. And before people start asking help from you with their projects and whatnot, I would like to ask people if they have any questions. You can raise your hand or just type in the chat. I'm happy to feed the question back to Augusto. I have a few on my own, but I would rather ask people first. If there's any forthcoming. While people thinking, oh, I think there someone was just saying applauding. Thank you, Paul.
Sorry, I think I've pressed the wrong hand there.
Oh, yes. I wasn't sure if you were saying well done or raising your hand.
Off the blocks. I was trying to. I know, just maybe potential literature thing. I once saw a presentation by a chap from the Aerospace Organization, which is a research institute in the States, which is about cost modeling, mainly in defense and aerospace. He did a lot of work on this, this thing you had at the beginning with technology S-curves as they roll forward. He'd collected lots of empirical data. I'll put the reference in the chat because he's on ResearchGate. And he literally collected all the performance data for aircraft, computers, performance of engines, all these things. And you can see, and he put basically interpolation through the data, and you can see the S shapes for different technologies. But he's got actual data to show that, so perhaps that might be further evidence to underpin, the initial bit. I'll just put it in the chat now. Actually. Yeah. I think you're on mute. You're on mute, Buster.
I didn't want to interrupt. Yeah, thank you so much, because that's something that I'm really looking for, actually confirmation of those propositions, because from the initial Schumpeterian perspective, it's not much of it's more of a tentative claim in the 80s and early 90s, and it's really nice to know that we have more support for their claims. Thank you so much.
Any other question? A lot of people thinking that I think something somewhat relevant. I have a question, Augusto, if you don't mind, is new Schumpeterism, or that line of thinking, has been applied to urban and regional studies quite a while now. So there has been a strong following, and there's been a lot of discussion regarding the institutional arrangements or structure to help drive that kind of innovation. And you you ended your presentation with the proposal, how are we going to bring everything together? What's the solution space? Did you come across in your research that what sort of good practice of institutional arrangements that kind of drive that kind of integration or systems thinking? Maybe not much in Brazil, or maybe in Brazil, or maybe elsewhere, because one of the things that I'm quite interested in is bottom-up, community-led solutions, digital solutions to these big problems, and often they do have a very strikingly different governance arrangements, ownership arrangements, financial arrangements when you compare to municipalities or big corporations. So I was wondering if it is something that you come across saying, if it's something that you see as a big potential answering these big wicked problems.
Thank you, Professor, for your question. In my thesis, I actually focused on the bottlenecks that we found here in Brazil. So as here I am the data guy, so I brought a lot of data in terms of the bottlenecks, what improved in the last 30 years for learning and cooperation. So in this case, what I found is, well, I had this database of funding projects for innovation. And what I found is like 90% of the money went to private companies with something. And a little bit went for the universities. But what happened was there is this field where the proposer could present their partners, and most of the time, 99% of the time, companies in Brazil, in the metropolitan areas I studied, never have with them any kind of other institute of research or universities. So there is there isn't a bridge between research and universities here, and enterprise companies in general. It's something that I found in my research, but it seems to at least where I live, it seems that there's going to be there's been more effort to bridge those in new areas, like new parks, trying to simulate what happened in San Francisco, because that's the pattern of solution. That's what should be. So they try to emulate that. What is problematic with that is that if you don't have it, you don't know you don't have it. If you're just emulating, you're just like make a show, but actually not bringing them together. Yeah, that's what it's pointing so far, and I call it like one of the constraints of this metropolitan lagging modernization, because we didn't modernize our relation between different institutions. It's always fairly close, and we have the research here and we have companies there. That's something that I focused, and the results were not as promising as I wanted.
That was great. If there's no other questions, I'm going to have a little follow-up. Actually, is that I wish that you could have had a chance to come to Manchester, because Manchester is obviously birthplace of Industrial Revolution, which is something we like to say all the time. But I think a lesser known fact is also that Manchester is the birthplace of cooperative movement, like 200 years ago, and parts of the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital was actually written here too. So there's a strong community spirit. There's a strong enterprise mindset in Manchester still today. And if you were to look at the smart city landscape in Manchester, what you will see is a lot of innovation labs, makers labs or makers markets, and a lot of partnerships, not between organizations, but between organizations and community members and just general public as well. So there's a lot happening here that might also provide a different sort of model, perhaps, to respond to neoliberal-driven, growth-driven, profit-driven smart city technologies to wicked problems that we are facing. Maybe next time after COVID, whenever.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. Actually, as I said, I'm in this moment of transition towards academia. It's really hard. Because in urban planning, in the industry, I got to think of everything at the same time. And academia needs to be more focused, and it's a different business. And I decided we are making the arrangements, going back to the UK as soon as we can, and I'm working with Professor Storper, which is a great honor. He's been a great mentor, and for sure I want to be to Manchester as soon as possible.
That's great. Do we have one final comments or questions from the participants? Otherwise, I'll draw this to conclusion. And thank you, Augusto. That was very informative. That was very great. I especially was struck by the amazing crazy video thing, which is something I'm definitely going to explore later.
Please do.
And thank you, Matthew, and thank you the people from Advanced in Data Science and AI team who actually created the seminar and asked us to come here today.